What about the role of China, though, in this? I mean, I'm really curious, uh, specifically as Belt and Road develops and China's presence increases. What is the African relationship with China's presence?
Okay, well, China, the China of the 21st century is different from the China of the 20th century. Some people forget that the first major railroad that China built in Africa was actually, it's called Tazara, the Tanzania and Zambia Railways, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which the discussion started in the 60s and it was built in the 70s, right? At that time, China was not yet a global power. It was a major country, right? But it was not yet a global economic power as it is today. So I think at that time, the relationship was more based on ideological comradeship, right? Here we have African countries emerging from the colonial regime and trying to chart an alternative path to development. And you have China with its long history also of dealing with Western imperialism and Asian imperialism as well, right? So they have something in common philosophically and ideologically. And China, of course, having an interest in seeing more countries, not only Africa, but more countries, pursue the similar path of socioeconomic development. So the relationship was based on that. But now that China is a major industrial power, China's main interest, in Africa is to obtain resources to fuel its factories and continue the spectacular rate of growth in China's economy. So as there's a interview with the late Samir Amin, the Egyptian economist, who said he was asked about China's relationship with Africa. And he said, listen, China will give an African leader anything that the leader wants. But what does the leader want from China? That is the key question. China, if it's in terms of money, China will give the money to get the raw materials, right? But what do you get out of it? And that's the key thing that African leaders have not been able to address successfully. And his suggestion was, you make sure that out of this relationship, you get a transfer of technology as well. So that in return, because China needs the raw material, and China will be willing to provide you with a level of technology to some extent in order to get that. But if you're only demanding for money alone, China is getting it very cheap, right? So African countries are not leveraging their relationships with China, right? And that is why, at the end of the day, it ends up being relatively similar. Yes, China may build major infrastructure like bridges, like major roads, which is great, which is better than what Western countries do, or the World Bank does. But at the end of the day, if you don't know how to build those bridges yourself, those roads, or to maintain them, then you now have a neocolonial relationship with somebody else. And that was Samir Amin's critique. And I agree with that critique as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead.